Recording in progress. Okay.
Still a bit shit. I think it's good.
Then my back is a little bit to it, is it? Let me see.
What happened out there?
It's the rust on the table.
Oh,
Kind of like the paint's all like crumbling off, which is a shame because I really like it. I just need to repaint it, which I'm obviously never going to do. Doing painting's fun. You never know.
But you have to like
Sand it.
sand it.
Yeah, I know.
And it's rusty, so then surely there's something that happens before the paint goes on, you know.
Yeah, like a coating thing. No. Okay, it's still a little bit. Then I'm gonna have my back to you a little bit if the camera's there. Okay, we'll just roll with it. I might just.
You want me to move back?
I think you're more in my eye line then. Or move.
Close.
Yeah, wait, come closer. No, we're clearly not professionals. No, you don't need to sit like that.
Be comfy.
Okay. I might just look at the camera a bit. And you. Okay, let's just go. Fucking hell. Sorry about this, Amy. Amy edits my podcast. She's like 40 minutes in and we still haven't started. Okay, so wait, I wrote down all the topics. I'm gonna just see what comes up. I'm feeling very chill today.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna start with who you are, what you do. Tell us a bit about Nikki, your journey, what you got into it, or what got you into everything that you're doing now. Then topics I wrote down is like trauma, fight or flight, where to start on a trauma healing journey.
Okay.
Was the question. Then like all the topics to do with like emotions, normalizing having emotions, but understanding like reactions and triggers versus like regulated emotions, let's say. Yeah. If we get to it, intuition versus fear and ego. And like how to know you're coming from a regulated place versus like your patterns and triggers or whatever. Yeah, we might not get into all. That's fine. And like if we get into like insecure detachment, neediness, like I've kind of done that on a podcast. But yeah, we'll go through that and see. And then the questions were
it's like do it more conversation.
Oh yeah, that's what it's always about.
I'll try and like ask you the question back.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's not just like you asking me.
Well, you're the guest at the end of the day. So you can do it for one or two, but don't feel the need to because you're my guest. Did you read the questions?
Yeah.
And what's your thoughts?
I can't remember them.
Very specific.
My brain's gone.
Some of those specific ones I just don't bother answering. No offense.
Relationship check-ins. It's too early. Not sure how I feel about that in general.
I know Kiva does them.
Yeah, it's so masculine.
Controlling it is, isn't it?
Tell me how you feel. How do I know if I'll ever get past the belief of not feeling good enough for my partner? Is it possible, or do I? Well, will we just do this at the end? We'll just like fly and.
But like I'm saying, do you even want to answer any of them?
How do I overcome this? Recently found out my past childhood trauma is affecting my life badly. Well, I'll answer that one. Relationship, is it possible to heal with a partner or best let it go? Well, I can definitely answer that one. How do I know if I'll ever get past the belief of not feeling good enough for my partner? Oh, easy. And then we can answer Claire's.
Okay. Maybe if I turn a bit more like this. Just not ladylike, am I? I kind of love this angle.
Yeah, I like that angle.
Look how relaxed we are. Okay. And then we're doing advertising today. Sponsors, page 2. Okay, we'll go in 3, 2, 1. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the podcast. No, the Health One podcast. Fucking hell. Okay, let me go again. Also, by the way, feel free to stop and start and be like, no, let's rewrite that because it's edited. So do what you need to do. And if you start talking about something you're like, I actually don't want to talk about that, that's fine. Okay. So 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Health One podcast. Today I am joined by my friend Nikki. Say hello, Nikki.
Hello, thank you for having me.
We're swapping mics today. So we're going to rotate because I'm no longer in my professional studio in Bali. So we're just going to have to make do.
Professional studio, my couch.
Yeah, we spent a good bit of time on the setup, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean it's not perfect, but it's good. It's
It'll
good enough.
It'll do. So yeah, you're just gonna have to like deal with it. And we've got loyal audience members. So, the information is going to be there today. At the end of the day, we're going to be talking about.
I've even known if we didn't say anything.
No, and I'm revealing all my secrets because I'm too authentic for my own good. Literally. Okay. So I met Nikki online virtually. We've been virtual friends for probably about 5 years now. And that's what I love about my Instagram. I've actually met quite a good few of my good friends through Instagram because I suppose before, like, I suppose coaching between like what we were interested in, it wasn't very mainstream.
No.
So we would have been introduced to a friend that I went to school with. Shout out to Kate. And yeah, just became friends ever since. And we're just chatting about like all different ideas. And last year, then we got the pleasure to meet in Bali. And now we're both in Australia. And she very kindly helped me out for my first few weeks when I was struggling to find somewhere to live. Yeah. Was I not the best housemate?
Definitely.
Well, yeah. So what I'll do is,
but you weren't here really.
I know.
Part of the furniture.
I know, quite literally part of the furniture, part of this couch. But yeah, what I'll do is I'll hand over to you if you want to tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. So my name is Nikki. I am a trauma specialist and mind health coach. Like Ola said, I've been coaching for probably around 6 years now. And where I started was nutrition. I was a nutrition coach primarily before I moved into anything to do with trauma. But I think you'll know yourself, like it's a process of you work with people and then you start seeing things differently. It's not necessarily what it is as face value. So I was working with people who, wanted to lose weight. And then I was like, hang on a second, let's talk about the quality of your thoughts or the way that you speak to yourself. And it was very like out of my realm of what I was trained to do. And then over time I've just continued to upskill, and then I went into life coaching, and then I went into like understanding more about neurolinguistic programming and the subconscious mind. And then it's just kind of taken me to this place where I work with people who have lifelong traumas, anxiety, depression, self-esteem issues, low confidence, that kind of thing.
Amazing. And what is it that got you into all of this? Like, I suppose you said it was like that natural progression, but was there anything that kind of you were chasing for yourself, or was there any particular topics that like lit you up?
Do you know this story? No.
Remind me, I know a lot of stories about you.
Yeah. What so like early teens, like my early to late teens, I had this like frustration and like pent up anger, like built up anger. And I was so snappy and passive aggressive with like everyone. I remember like someone would ask me a question and it would feel like a personal attack all the time. And I remember like having this moment. I was actually in school, so it was maybe like 15, 16. I remember having this moment of like looking around the lunch table at my friends and being like, no one else is this like snappy. Like why am I getting so worked up over tiny things that don't matter? So I was kind of like aware that something was like, what was wrong with me? But obviously you don't have the language or anything at that point. And then when I was 16, first few weeks of college, just before my 18th birthday, one of my friends passed away. And so that then turned into anxiety, like extreme anxiety, to the point where I was getting like pins and needles in my face, in my fingers. Like I couldn't breathe when I was going to sleep. And I went to the doctors and they didn't help me. They were like, you should breathe into a paper bag. Yeah, that was what he told me
I thought that was a myth.
No, that's legit what he told me to do. And like it's actually like, when I think back on this time, it's kind of funny because me and my mum was like making a joke out of it, as you do. And I remember actually like looking at my mum in the car being like, where the hell do you even get a paper bag from? And we was actually considering going to the chemist. You know, sometimes you get your prescription in like a paper bag.
Yeah.
And we was going to ask them if we could use one, but we didn't, because I was just like, what the hell? Like, but how sad to think that I actually said to my mum, well, where do we get a paper bag from? Like, that was going to freaking
that was going to be our answer. Isn't that so funny? Like, that's the stereotypical version of anxiety that we would have grown up with. Like, I'm thinking of, I think it was in recess, one of the kids, I'm thinking of Spinelli, but I don't think she was anxious, but one of them was like, had a paper bag and was like, maybe it was actually a completely different show, but anyways, my brain is going to recess. But they had a paper bag and it was just like breathing into it, and it was like, this geek, this loser, this.
I think I remember this.
Like, this would have been like, I've spoken about like my mental health journey on the podcast quite a good bit, and my association with mental health, like, I absolutely stigmatized myself when I realized I had anxiety, because I was like, I am not like them people. They're losers, they're weird, they're not able to be in a social environment and blah blah blah. I am not like them, because many years ago we didn't have that language and understanding that like everyone can deal with mental health issues, everyone can have anxiety. Anxiety is an emotion and a feeling. But it was absolutely like, my stereotypical version was like losers who breathe into paper bags and have massive braces around their head.
Yeah. It's funny because my understanding of it was that I was actually writing about this the other day. I can't remember what I was doing, writing it for, maybe a caption or something. But I was like, I didn't know that it wasn't meant to feel that way. So I think when you're so young and you don't know that it's not meant to feel that way, you don't know how it is meant to feel. It's just like, well, how, like, this is just how it is. So I like couldn't breathe when I was going to sleep, and I would wake up and like be breathless. And I remember just being like, it was just normal. No one, I would tell adults around me that like this was happening, and it was just like brushed off kind of thing. So I had the awareness that something was wrong, but coupled with like, this is how I felt, and these were my behaviors and my reactions to things, like snappy, short, but I was so hyper independent. So like, I had this ability to just cut people off, like so avoidant. So like, my friends would call me Ice Queen, and it was just like, I if you even remotely hurt me, see you later.
Bye.
No, like, and I wouldn't ever think about it again. I wouldn't even like ruminate on the thought. I'd just be like, bye, block, delete, see you later. So basically from there, I had this awareness, but nothing really changed. And then when I was like 20 years old, I was at uni and had gone home to Manchester. I was on the train from Manchester back to uni, and my mum had given me the book, The Secret. And I was, by the way, like, I was the person all the way through uni who didn't remove the books from the cellophane. Like, they're still in the cellophane, even now in my mum's house. I was not a reader, but my phone died on the train, and I didn't have anything to do. And you know, when you're like, you don't want to be that loser that doesn't like just stares into space.
Yeah.
That psychopath that stares into space. So I read the book, and it was like this huge epiphany from like the first chapter, where I was like, what the hell is this? And yeah, like that was it for me. I was like, I was almost like annoyed as well. I was like, does everyone know about this and they've just not told me? Is this actually a secret that people just keep a secret? And then yeah, from there I just became obsessed, and I was like reading every single personal development book. I remember I read The Chimp Paradox a few years later, and then Professor Stephen Peters, who wrote the book, was doing a speech at like a conference, and then I went to the conference, and then I like got into like Mel Robbins and just incredible speakers. But I was so young, like I was in my early 20s when this was happening, so I was doing it for me. And then it got to the point where like people were asking me, like they could see a difference in me, and people were asking me like, you know, you've got a really positive outlook on things. And then that's when I got into coaching.
Unreal. I do actually remember like years ago seeing, because we were at Instapals, and seeing you posting about like, I've invested in these mentorships, I've gone to these courses, I've read these books and everything. I remember just being like, oh my God, like she's putting so much money into this stuff.
Yeah.
And it was such a like a lack mindset for me of ever being like, there's no need for me to put like time or money or energy into my mental health, because no one else around me was doing it. But it definitely inspired me a little bit, because I was kind of like, well, I am interested in this stuff too, so maybe I should spend my money on this stuff.
Yeah.
But it was always like, no, you need to spend money on clothes, you need to spend money on holidays, you need to spend money on drinking, you need to spend money on all these things, because mental health just wasn't really spoken about back then, like I said. But isn't it interesting, I suppose you said about a positive outlook, that's kind of really where it all started, isn't it? It's trying to be more positive and everything in between. And I suppose, what was your first course that you did with mindset? Would it have been NLP?
With mindset, I did my life coaching first, so it's kind of like mindset in some way. And then after that I did NLP. Yeah. And then in between that I did like mental health first aid, like a few things around like mental health, but it's a slightly different approach. But yeah, NLP, and then timeline therapy.
Unreal. Can you tell us a little bit about NLP?
Yeah, so NLP stands for neuro linguistic programming. It was actually 3 years ago this week that I went, which is weird. I was getting all like the memories the other day. So neuro-linguistic programming, neuro, mind, linguistic, language programming, like your patterns. So essentially the whole concept or the theories that NLP represents are that we operate 90 to 95% from our subconscious mind, and our subconscious mind is basically full of programs and patterns that essentially repeat. So what you learn about yourself earlier in life becomes the patterns that you repeat later on. So you learn a lot about yourself in the first 7 years of your life. That becomes your foundation. So the way that your parents interact with you, the way that you interact with, you know, kids in school, a lot of who you become in adulthood is based on the first 7 years of your life and what you've been led to believe about yourself and the world. And then, you know, you go through later life, you get into relationships, you learn things about love and, you know, worthiness and things like that, and then they become part of your programming. So essentially NLP is the programs that you've learned about yourself previously, and we want to look into that, and we want to understand how it's helping you and how it's hindering you, because there's so many positives of that. Like a huge positive of the way that your subconscious mind works is that you don't have to relearn everything every time you do it. You don't have to relearn how to drive. You don't have to relearn how to ride a bike or how to cook spaghetti bolognese. Like, you don't have to relearn it, but the things that are practical are hugely beneficial, but then the things that are emotional in terms of relationships, your self-belief, like that can very much be hindered.
Amazing. I love that. And that's what I always try to explain to people who are doing coaching is like, if you just commit like a few months to yourself, like a few weeks even, of just trying to focus on what area that you're trying to improve or expand.
Yeah.
And just to actually dedicate that time, and like no bullshit, no distractions, just actually commit. You are not going to have to do that again if you do it right.
Yeah.
Because it is about, it's about repetition if you do it with the right coach. And this is what I see quite a lot in the industry is like, people will be doing coaching after coaching after coaching, and I can tend to be like the last resort for a lot of people, because they'll have tried all these different things, and I'm like, whoa, why have you done all these different styles of coaching and not learned anything, not embedded anything or embodied anything? Because they're not actually working with their neurological system. They're not embedding things into their subconscious or unlearning what's in their subconscious that's causing them to act out in these programmings. And I think that's an incredible way to think. As adults, we have the responsibility to unlearn what is in our subconscious mind. And what a lot of people will do is like blame themselves for what's in their subconscious mind, or just unconsciously react out of their subconscious programming without actually saying, okay, is how I am I am the way I am. Can't change that right now in this present moment. But is how I am showing up as my present self, is that something I want to continue to operate with? And then seeking, I suppose, action from that or support from that as well. I suppose, can you explain to people listening a little bit more about like the subconscious versus unconscious and conscious?
Yeah, great question. And I agree with everything that you say there. So simply, your brain has three ways of processing information. So you have conscious, subconscious, and unconscious. Yeah, sorry, I've got a very quiet voice. So your brain has these three ways of processing information. Your consciousness is like, you can think about this like your prefrontal cortex. It's like the bigger picture, the vision, the rational thinking brain. So there's lots of benefits to this part of your brain because you can see things for a bigger picture, you can rationalize, and it's almost like the human part of you. Then you have a subconscious, which is like the way that I describe the subconscious is like it's a filing cabinet. Like think of that old school filing cabinet that you would get in like an office, like the big gray ugly things. And there's drawers and there's files and folders in each drawer. And that's very much how your subconscious is. Like there's hundreds and hundreds of files and folders, and in each of these files there's for example, there might be one on confidence. Here are all the reasons why you're not confident. Here are all the reasons why you are. Relationships, here are all your memories about relationships. So I very much like visualize your subconscious mind to be like that. And remember, your subconscious mind has got one role, and it's to store information and retrieve it back when it's relevant. So an example would be like, let's say in the relationships folder, you've got an ex-boyfriend who drove a black Mercedes and he cheated on you. And you see a black Mercedes driving down the road, your brain instantly through association goes, is that my ex-boyfriend? And then in that moment with that thought, you start to feel anxious. So like the power of your subconscious mind, it literally just looks for ways to retrieve back information that's relevant to you. It's very powerful. But like I said, there's also incredibly like useful things about that. Like we don't have to relearn spaghetti bolognese every time we cook it. But and then we have the unconscious. So the unconscious is like it's very, very hard to become aware of what's in your unconscious because it's just not necessarily anything. It's not part of your thinking process. So your unconscious is like the things that you just do that you don't even really think about. So like mannerisms, someone might have said something to you before, like, oh, like, do you realize you did this? And it's never even crossed your mind. An example that I like to use is that I was once in this like random like countryside pub back home, and this random guy came over to me and was like, oh, he was like, random question, but are you Elaine's daughter? And I was like, yeah, who the hell are you? And he was like, you have the exact same mannerisms as your mom. Wow. So he just saw, like, I'm never going to be conscious of aware or conscious of the fact that I have the same mannerisms as my mom. But he was like in shock of how similar I was. And he used to work with her like 30 or 40 years ago. And he was like, tell your mum I said hi. So like that's an unconscious, like just things that you do that you're just never even going to be aware of. And like thought processes that you have that might just, they're so normal and real to you that why would you question them? So we operate 5 to 10% from our consciousness. So 5 to 10% from bigger picture, like vision, rationality, and 90 to 95% from subconscious, unconscious.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing. I want to just add a point about like behavior change. I spoke about this in another podcast episode, so I'm not going to go into behavior change too much here. But I suppose what people don't realize with the unconscious mind and with the subconscious is that your efforts of trying to change behavior is going to take your conscious. You're going to have to be intentional and use your conscious mind for creating that change until it's embedded in your subconscious. And the reason things are stored in your subconscious is so using your conscious mind takes energy. It takes a lot of resources for you to think about them. So you don't want to be doing that all the time. You don't need to be operating at this capacity. It takes so much energy. Like, think about if you start a new job or start a new skill or a new hobby or whatever, it's going to take so much time for you to just even familiarize yourself with the environment, with the people, with the politics, whatever's going on. You're going to take a little bit of time to adapt, and your nervous system is as well. And through repetition, through continued exposure, it will over time embed itself into your subconscious mind. And that's why behavior change can feel so fucking difficult at the start, because you're like, I can't do this. This is so much energy. This is whatever. And this is where our patterns can trigger as well from the subconscious, that you're not good enough. You're not this type of person. Unworthiness. Yeah. So I just wanted to add that. I suppose with patterns, so I know that's a common thing for a lot of people, is unworthiness, is feeling not good enough, is, I think we had a question about that actually as well, didn't we? Let's have a look. The question was about basically, yeah, how do I know if I'll ever get past the belief of not feeling good enough for my partner? What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think the way the question is worded, like, how do I know if, like, that's a problem in itself, because how do you know if? Well, it's not something that just happens by chance. How do I know if I'm gonna do this thing? You have to take action towards that thing, and if you take action, you're consistent, and you have the right frameworks, it's achievable. Nothing is unachievable in terms of belief systems and what you can think about yourself. An example that I like to use all the time is Kanye West. Like, he fully thinks he is Jesus. He fully thinks he is God. He thinks he's like reincarnated as God. He thinks he's the greatest rapper of all time. It might be a level of delusion, but he believes that to his core. So you can believe whatever you want to believe about yourself. So how do I know if I'm going to feel worthiness? You take action towards that. It's not just something that happens. Like, you have to build that relationship with yourself, that you're like, I don't have the mindset that I have today just because I woke up one day and I was like, oh, and had a huge epiphany. Like, it's consistent action over time that creates a change in your belief system. So if you want to feel worthy or good enough for your partner, take action.
And I think that's a big thing with like identity with a lot of people. Like, a lot of people will be like, I'm just not a confident person. I'm just not the type of person that does this. And like, you get to decide what type of person you are. Okay. Yeah. Plain and simple, you get to decide. But I think a lot of us, so obviously we have programming and conditioning throughout our whole life, and we will filter in and filter out what aligns with what we believe. Yes. So we will filter in multiple, like a bucket of evidence as to why we are not a confident person, as to why, oh, that time I tried to be a confident person, something didn't go to plan. Oh, that's reassurance again. Yeah, no, we don't do that anymore. We don't put ourselves in front of people. That's a scary thing to do. And this is what, so I suppose when you say take action, it's really about like trying to find that evidence, trying to prove to yourself that like you are this person. And that's what's really important with identity. And like, I suppose if I use an example of the fitness identity, okay, so a lot of people have this identity that they're very much a fitness person, okay, and this is very common with people trying to support their hormones and their gut health. They're very much in this toxic cycle of being a fitness person, of looking like a person who has muscles or abs or whatever. And because this is on an identity level, they must create behaviors that align with this identity. So if they're trying to come to me, say, for example, and trying to change their behaviors because it doesn't align with their health, it's very difficult for them to do so because it misaligns with their identity. We use another example of someone who always feels people abandon them in a relationship. You know, that is going to be something that they're always going to be creating behaviors around that. I suppose you want to talk a little bit about how that can show up with people. I think that's a thing in relationships, and like I'm doing Nikki's Regulating in Love course at the minute, and it's really, really good. And even it's funny, like I can talk about identities and I can talk about behaviors, and I can really take accountability and responsibility for a lot of the things that I do in my other aspects of life. But sometimes with relationships, I think that's the thing that I'm kind of like, but it's really scary.
So like, there's a lot to say on this. Let me just gather my thoughts. The whole unworthiness thing, like, most adults deal with that in some level. Very, very, very common for men. Incredibly common for men, in feeling not good enough, not worthy enough in their career. And if they're not successful in their career, they don't feel good enough for their relationship. So their career massively impacts their relationship, their marriage, whatever. And with women, it more often than not comes down to like looks. Like, am I good enough in the way that I look?
Yeah.
The thing, like, and the belief system just of like, am I good enough? Am I worthy for whatever? And this all gets to be so simple. And it's really, what do you desire? What's the thing that you desire? Do you desire to have a happy relationship and a successful business? Like, what are the things that you desire? And get really, really clear and try and get as niche as possible with it. And then understand what beliefs you have that are blocking that thing. So for example, like, if you want to feel good enough in your relationship, I desire to feel good enough in my relationship, which, by the way, your partner is irrelevant in that. If you want to feel good enough, that is nothing to do with your partner and everything to do with you, because it's a feeling that you can create. So I want to feel good enough in my relationship. That's my desire. But I have a belief that I'm not good enough. And I want you to ask yourself, these are the reasons why. Like, this is the reason why. That's programming. That is, you've learned something about yourself in the past that has led you to believe this. But you have this desire that I want to feel good enough. So that's how you know you're out of alignment and you're incongruent to like your prefrontal cortex, your consciousness, your higher like person that you really are. So then once you have the desire and the block, you redesign how, like, the belief, the story. And you might not believe it straight away, and that's fine. So for example, the rewriting of the story in this case might be something along the lines of, I want to feel good enough for my partner. I want to feel worthy. And in order for me to feel good enough and worthy, I need to believe about myself that I am whole. I am enough. The things that I bring to the table are good. I need to believe that my appearance is good. It's enough. And I need to start to see the way I look at myself in a different way. So you get really clear on what that is specifically for you. And then you start to, like you said earlier, embody those new beliefs. So whenever the old one comes up, in that moment, you start to realign yourself with those new beliefs. And then that's literally, it doesn't have to be complicated. It's you just recognizing that this is how old me would handle this, and this is how new me is going to handle it now.
And I think that's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, is like, it's on you. Like, the responsibility is on you. It's not on everyone that's in your relationships. Like, of course, if there are people that are treating you like shit, like, be gone, goodbye. But people, like, one liner that always stuck to me is like, people, I can't remember what the one-liner is now, but basically, I am not good at one-liners. Every time I tried to say something on the podcast about a one-liner quote, gone instantly out of the brain, even though the concept of it is floating around there in circulation somewhere. Something to do with people will treat you how you present yourself, like how you show them to treat you, basically.
Yeah.
Like, if you disrespect yourself, they're going to disrespect you.
People how to treat you.
Yeah, basically, you teach them how to love you. There's like quite a few of them, actually. That's why I'm getting confused. Okay. But basically, if you constantly feel like people are going to abandon you, you are insecure in yourself, and you're going to operate from that place of insecurity. And you're going to find, like I said, we filter in, we filter out. You're going to find reasons why people abandon you and filter out the ones that they don't abandon you. And like, I even find that myself. Like, sometimes I can be feeling, hasn't happened in a while, but like in the past, if I think back to, like, I could have been around quite a lot of friends and I felt lonely. And that those two things don't combine, because I would have been just focusing on the fact that I'm around a lot of people, but I'm feeling disconnected from them. Whereas like there is a lot of people. So and why was I feeling disconnected from everyone else? Because I was disconnected from myself. There's a lot of things that you can do. And like I said, it's a tough pill to swallow. It is not what people want to hear. And it's triggering. And it's like, it's not to put blame on you. Like, I want to repeat that. It's not to put blame on you. It's not for you to think it's all my fault that I am the way I am, that people treat me the way I am. It's to give you back your power.
Yeah.
So that you understand how to move forward, so that you can take action and move forward. And this is what all of this is about. You can stay stuck in your program, and you can stay stuck in your beliefs. You can stay stuck where you are in your current present moment, in your unhappy relationships, your unhappy job, whatever it is. Or you can decide today that you want to change. And that's like what Nikki says. I love the way you say that. And when I first heard you say it gets to be that simple, I was like, but it's not that simple.
Well,
but it is.
Everything to be harder, because then it gives us an excuse to not do it.
Yeah, quite literally. But it doesn't mean that it's not difficult in terms of emotions. So I suppose this can lead us into like when we are dysregulated in our emotions versus being able to think about situations rationally and clearly. And you have your emotional mastery coaching. So do you want to talk us a little bit about, I suppose, and a big thing as well for people is not, they're unsure of how they're operating from like intuition and security and like inner knowing versus this ego, this fear, or like their triggers.
Yeah. So emotional mastery, I'll start there. Emotional mastery is my signature coaching program, where basically I'll take you on a 12-week journey where we go through, in week 1 we set some really, really clear intentions of what we want to achieve. So it could be you're working on your confidence, you're working to reduce your anxiety, you're working to handle or improve your emotional regulation in terms of like anger or frustration. So if you were like me and you had those like hot-headed, like snappy tendencies, and also things like depression, where you can, you know, feel really, really overwhelmed and kind of stuck in that freeze state, like shutdown modes. We go through all of it. It incorporates both the mind and the body. So we focus on energy and feelings as well as thoughts and stories. We really heavily bring both of those together. It's not just one or the other. They both need to, in my opinion, be worked on so you can kind of create long-term change. And what was the second question about ego and intuition?
Like, so like if you are trying to come from, if you're trying to like start this journey, you're trying to heal, you're trying to like become more secure, more connected, more in touch with your intuition, how do you know the difference between being emotionally dysregulated, reacting from like ego and fear versus that intuition and that higher self?
Okay. Yeah, we're very, very, very bad at this as humans. I've got like a post in my drafts that's like things we are bad at.
Stay tuned.
And this is one of them. Like we're just we're primal. So we're wired to protect and defend ourselves, which means that when there's an emotion present, more often than not, the limbic brain, which is like your chimp brain, your primal brain, is going to go into that protection and defensive reaction. So my biggest tip, if you're learning this and trying to understand the difference between like intuition and ego, is when you have an emotion, anger, frustration, jealousy, whatever it is, just pause for a second. And like nothing's gonna happen, nothing wild can happen from here. Just pause and connect with yourself in that moment. Just check in with your body and notice how you feel, and almost like replay back the thoughts that you've had. So like listen to the thoughts that you're having, maybe even write them down. In order to move on from the programs that you've been repeating when you have these emotions present, you need to slow everything down. So think about it like this. And again, I'm seeing this logically. Your program or your patterns that you've always done are literally like a loop in your subconscious mind. It's like a neural pathway. And your subconscious has got one role, it's to store and retrieve information. So when you have a trigger, you just repeat those patterns over and over and over. If you want to change the pattern, you have to do something different. So when you pause and you don't react in that moment, your subconscious mind is like, system error. This is wrong. We don't know this because it's not part of the pattern. And so what happens in that moment is your consciousness is engaged. So now you get to relearn, well, how do I want to respond? Is this feeling an accurate representation of what's actually happening? Because 9 times out of 10, it's not, because your feelings aren't facts. Your feelings aren't always an accurate representation. So just pause for a second and sit with how that feels. It's so uncomfortable, but once you've done it a few times, it almost gives you this like sense of power and control, that my emotions don't control me anymore. I get to sit and think about how I want to respond. And something that I do all the time is I will have if it's something specific with a person that's triggered me, or I'm feeling angry because of something, I will have the conversation with them in my notes before I have the conversation with them in person. That just really helps me process. And if when I've finished writing the thing in my notes and I still feel angry, I still feel frustrated, I leave it a little bit longer. And then maybe after, like the next day, 24 hours later, if it's still an issue, I will bring it up. But in that, what happens when I bring it up after the emotion has passed is it allows me to communicate it calm and rationally, instead of like fight or flight, like limbic chimp brain. So it's very, very powerful. And I actually had this client who I was working with probably about a year and a half ago. He owned a company. He was a father of 2 kids, 2 teenagers from Canada, and he was also married. And I remember it so well because one of the first things that he said to me when I was like, what is it that you're working towards? He went, my wife's about to leave me and my kids hate me. And I was like, okay. I was like, tell me more. And he was like, I get home from work and he's like, I can't help but just be annoyed that there's a plate on the table and like this has happened and this hasn't been done. And he's like, I'm just so reactive to things. That wasn't really his actual language. Yeah. And then I said to him, literally the first tool I gave to him, I was like, okay, before you do anything, before you respond and react, you're going to almost imagine that your jaw's like wired shut and you can't open your jaw. You can't open your mouth, and you're going to go somewhere, whether it's the bedroom, the bathroom, upstairs, go somewhere and just do laps and just process and ask yourself, how do I want to react and respond? Like, is this actually an issue? Is this feeling an accurate representation of what's happening? And 2 weeks later, so I'd had 3, this was the 3rd session that I'd had with him. He came on the phone and he was like, my daughter said she likes me again. Aww. And I was like, oh my God.
That I like, you know.
Yeah, she'd made a comment of like how his energy had changed and how like his reactions and stuff had changed the dynamic of the household. And she was like, I like you again. Aww. So fucking simple. No, just stop saying the first thing that's on your mind and just take a chill for a second.
It's that reactive impulses. And like, I remember hearing the pause before you respond analogy like years ago when I was kind of healing from my eating disorder. And even with like binge eating, any sort of addictive behaviors that you engage in, any sort of like explosive reactions, just take that moment to breathe and respond and check in with yourself, because it is so powerful and we feel like we are led by our emotions and we don't feel like we're the one driving the car. We're not in the driver's seat. And you are the one in the driver's seat, but it doesn't feel like you're driving it because it's very much bodily as well. I think people talk about emotions quite a lot and talk about like processing emotions and journaling and talking, and they're all amazing and important, but you have to bring the body on board with the mind too. And that pause and maybe some regulation strategies in between as well, of self-soothing and taking a breath and checking in with your environment, coming back into your body versus being in your head, they can all really give you back your power in that moment. And it's really interesting. Like I always remember like with an urge of to binge, I remember at one point actually feeling how intense it was in my body, just as a witness, just observing what was happening. And I remember being like, oh my God, I can just see that this is something that's happening, but I don't actually need to engage with this. Yeah. And it's that moment or that realization that you're just like, holy shit, I don't have to continue doing what I'm doing. Yeah. And, that can be easier said than done for yourself. And it's always difficult to regulate if like someone in your environment is still, I suppose it's difficult to change if you and this person or you and this environment have been a certain way to date and suddenly you want to try and change yourself but they're not on board or the work environment's so crazy or whatever it is. So that can be something that can still be difficult to do, and like obviously if you can remove yourself from the environment, like what you said, just take yourself out of a room or whatever, that can be very beneficial. But at the end of the day, it does come back to you and how you want to show up. And these are all nicely weaving together, I suppose, with how you want to identify as, what beliefs you want to have about yourself. Like, are you just an angry person? Have you always like solidified? Like, I was just always a hormonal raging bitch when I was a teenager. That was it. But I didn't have the ability to process anger. Like the way that anger was modeled for me was explosive or suppressed and shamed. So that's the only way that I knew how to react. So I would always get to a point where I'd get angry and I would cry because I didn't know how to deal with it, or I would shout and I would slam doors and I would do all this kind of shit. Whereas now, and after that, then I would have went on a journey of like actually trying to suppress the anger, which creates depression and creates that freeze response. Whereas now I'm like, I have a right to be angry, but I don't have a right to react and project that anger onto other people. And I think that's the biggest thing with emotions, is like, you are so entitled to be emotional. You are so entitled to feel how you feel, but you have the responsibility to handle that appropriately at the end of the day. And I think that's really the biggest thing. I think a lot of women are afraid to process emotions, afraid to actually, like, they shame themselves for just feeling a certain way or for feeling guilty or whatever. And you cannot control your initial response, your initial reaction. You cannot control how your body feels about something. You cannot control about how what tendency you have to gear towards, I suppose. But you can choose to engage with that pause and then choose to respond afterwards. And that's the biggest thing I see with coaching, is that clients will beat themselves up. And I'm always like, do not. You have decided to commit to change. You are actively trying to better yourself. It doesn't matter if this week it didn't go well or this week you quote unquote failed, even though it's not a failure. Every time something goes wrong, you get to learn. But you are actively trying to better yourself and improve yourself. You cannot control how you're initially going to continue to respond, because it's been years and years of operating this way or believing these things about yourself. So it's going to take some time. It's going to take a little bit of a journey for you to move through that. And I suppose the next question that we had would have been about like a healing journey. And I suppose we haven't talked about like trauma, and this is where this can be really difficult for people, is like, if you were trying to change a behavior, change a belief, but you have unprocessed trauma with that. Oh shit, the battery's gone. Do you have your Apple charger? I never even thought about the charger. Thank you. It has to be. I never even thought about that. Yes. Thank God. Woo. Yeah, I suppose that's the next question that we had about like trauma and healing. And like, this is a really important thing, is that like, if you have unprocessed or I suppose if you don't have, what's the other word I'm looking for? Suppressed trauma. If you've got if you've got unprocessed or suppressed trauma, it can be very difficult for you to change. It can be very difficult for you to create new beliefs about yourself, because you're operating from this place of, I suppose with trauma, there's a concept called procedural memory, that it can be very much based on your senses. So you can go about your day to day and be very much triggered by things in your environment, and it can bring you right back, as if you were experiencing the trauma in the current present day moment. So that, I think, like there's big trauma and there's little trauma. I kind of recorded a podcast on this, I think, already, and I haven't put it out. I'm trying to think what I've talked about trauma on the podcast before. Well, I suppose we can go into it a little bit about the fight or flight and stuff too.
Yeah.
Because it's important to understand this. It's important to understand that like sometimes your body will respond and react to things because it's coming from something unhealed or unprocessed from you from the past. And we tend to think that, so there's a big difference between can't do something and can do something. Like there's a big difference between you're procrastinating on something and you're feeling, you want to change, but you're not that arsed or whatever, versus you physically can't move through this pattern or move through this situation because of the trauma. And that's to do with your nervous system. That can be from shifting into your fight or flight, that can be shifting into your freeze response. And I think it's so beneficial for people to understand these different aspects of what can happen with their nervous system.
Yeah.
So do you want to, I suppose, talk a little bit about maybe the polyvagal theory or anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah. So I see trauma as almost like a loop. So like the event happens, whatever that event might be, and the emotion that you experience as a result of that event, if you don't know how to handle that emotion, if you don't know what to do with it, you don't know how to process it. We talk about that word quite a lot. Most people don't know how to process it. So what happens is it then starts to create belief systems. It starts to create behavior as a result of that thing that happened. So for example, if you had a parent that wasn't present for you as a child, you might then you might feel unloved, you might feel abandoned, you might feel rejected, but you don't have the terminology or the language to explain that as a child. So instead you create belief systems like, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm unloved, people abandon me. And then what might happen as a result of that is, as you get older, you are incredibly avoidant, you cut people off, you block people out, etc. And you might become hyper independent. So this is like the loop that I'm referring to. The trauma happens, the emotion's created, you don't know how to handle that emotion, so it starts to create different behavioral patterns. And then the way that a trauma loop isn't necessarily closed is that you're still in the behavior. So in order for us to close that loop, we have to look at the behavior that the trauma has created, and then understand, like I said earlier, what's the desire? How do I want to behave? Instead of like, what's the behavior that I want to have instead of this? And then start to create that behavior in what you do day to day. And then eventually that's going to be the way that you respond and react naturally, and the loop closes.
I think that's a great way to explain that, because I think a big thing people are stuck on these days is like trauma healing is becoming a trendy topic and people are chasing healing. And this is,
it gives me the idea.
Yeah. So I went on my own healing journey and I spoke about it on previous podcasts. And now that I am going deeper with education and doing my courses with trauma, I am seeing that there is no destination of healed. Like it just does not exist. We're constantly evolving as humans. We're constantly going to be exposed to things. And like what was really interesting about me was like I went through stuff in my personal life this year, and it was like I was brought right back. And I was like, what the fuck? I did all this healing work. I thought I was healed. Why am I still this version of myself? And it really shook me to my core, because I was like, I thought I was this confident person now and this enlightened and like da 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 da. How did I still go back to these patterns? Because there is no such thing as healed. There is a thing about being, you have processed your trauma, you have rewritten your story, you are aware of what your triggers are, and you're aware of how to integrate that into your day to day. And like you said, choose how you want to respond, choose how you want to act, and choose how you want to show up despite what has happened to you. And kind of make peace with what has happened to you. I think that's the biggest thing. I suppose maybe I haven't really thought about this in depth, but maybe my definition of healed trauma is that, and is being at peace with what happened to you and not internalizing that, but also not continuing to show up from that place and not continuing to project. What would you think your definition of healed trauma is? Integrated trauma is probably a better word.
I think huge part of this for me is self-awareness. Mm-hmm. So like the more you can be aware, the more control you have over it. Mm. Our emotions are not meant to consume us. We're not meant to be controlled by our emotions. We're meant to have emotions that we feel, and then we are meant to make decisions based on our rational thinking brain. And so the primal instinct that we have, if you're controlled like predominantly by that primal instinct, your self-awareness is generally going to be really low. So for me, like healing trauma is you're just aware of like how your energy and how your reactions and responses to things impact you. What's like, so if I react and respond this way, what's like the collateral damage of that going to be? Who am I going to hurt? How am I going to impact the people around me? What am I potentially going to create for myself in the future if I respond and react this way? And it is just that, like, those momentary choices that, you know, it's not this like big thing that once you arrive. It's like you say, it's like in the momentary choices and you feeling in control and feeling that you have the power.
As cheesy as that sounds. Yeah, and I guess I want to add to that about like bodily sensations and the somatic side of things, because I suppose what we've spoken about a lot has been the brain and has been your thoughts and your conscious mind. But with trauma, obviously, there is an element of panic, fear, feeling out of control, not being able to manage the uncomfortable sensations, feeling like you need to flight or fight or complete shutdown. So you do need to bring your nervous system and your body on board with the brain. So obviously we're talking about processing so far to a very much a mindset side of things, or a language side of things, or a belief side of things.
Yeah, so the body side.
Yeah, so we do need to bring the body on board. And I think that's what scared me the most, was like I have worked so much on rewriting my beliefs and all these kind of things, but yet when a specific trigger showed up for me, I was brought right back into my body the way that I was when that showed up.
Yeah.
And I think that's where regulation and showing yourself that you are safe in your present moment is important. So for people listening, I suppose I'll just throw out a few regulation strategies and you can feel free to add.
Just before you start, like the key is to just feel safe. Like feel safe in your body, and then it's like using regulation strategies to feel safe holding whatever emotion it is.
Yeah.
So the only reason we want to fight or flight or go into freeze is because the emotion that we feel is consuming and it's overwhelming. So when you can feel so anxious but simultaneously feel safe, or you feel so angry but simultaneously feel safe, like it's creating that safety and that groundedness in your body whilst holding the heavy emotion.
Yeah, amazing. And that's really important. It's like we can be in our fight or flight, and then we can, if we don't interrupt the fight or flight or don't deactivate or kind of come back down from that high by making ourselves feel safe, we can shift into the freeze response. And it's very difficult for you to interrupt or help yourself move forward from the freeze response. But it's a lot easier or a lot more manageable to interrupt the fight or flight response. So like a very common thing is like suppressed anger, or an overwhelming amount of anxiety and a lack of feeling safe in your body. So you just shut down and you just disconnect and dissociate from the world. So that's what's really interesting when you learn about what's happening in your body and you have that language of understanding how you're operating and how you're showing up. That gives you back the ability to intervene and help yourself move forward. None of this blame, none of this shame, none of this suppression. It don't work no more, and we don't do that no more. But like simple regulation strategies that have really helped me is, number one has been breathing, like shifting your breathing.
Yeah.
So for me, with anxiety, years of anxiety, I would have been breathing really rapid and really shallow to the point that I would have had chest pain, would have been hyperventilating, panic attacks, and like severe digestive issues. So a big thing for me was, I remember the very first time lying down and doing a body scan meditation, and they told me to breathe into my stomach, from my stomach right up to my chest, and it was like this miraculous thing that I had never done before. And I was like, what the fuck? This peace I have just felt within my body what magic just happened. So that's a very, very simple tool that I say to clients, is to start breathing from your diaphragm, your stomach, right up until your chest, and follow that breath go from your stomach up to your chest. I use the breathing pattern 4-4-8. There's multiple ones you can use, but if you breathe in from 4 up to the top of your chest, pause for 4, so don't inhale or exhale, and then exhale to release for the count of 8 right down into your stomach. That alone, especially if you can like lie down or sit down or do some sort of like body scan check-in awareness, that can really, really help. There's like yoga you can do, there's grounding exercises you can do, there's tapping you can do, there is trying to look for things in your environment or people in your environment that do make you feel safe. There's like, obviously you can remove yourself out of environments until you feel safe and kind of go back into them. And then there's, I suppose for me, they're kind of like in the moment ones. And then outside of that, like you can work on regulating your nervous system and supporting what's known as your window of tolerance by really like, you know, doing like cold showers, or even before, I suppose we get into that, sleeping, eating enough food, not letting your blood sugars drop too much, you know, doing your journaling, your meditation, doing all these kind of things that keep you feeling well, getting outside in nature, all those kind of basic things, connect with people, etc. But there are things that can be done, such as like ice baths. I'm drawing a bloody blank now.
I think there's so many things that you can do. But it's funny because I generally, like, my client will come to me in consultation stage and be like, I'm doing all of the things that everyone tells me to do. I'm doing the breathing, I'm doing the walking, I'm doing the ice baths, I'm doing the journaling. Like, why is it not working? And that's something that I get all the time. Like, I'm listening to the podcast, like, why do I still have this feeling? And there is a huge step that I think people miss. Like, it's not really understood that it's not necessarily about what you do. So like, doing is like an adjective, right? It's like a doing word. I'm doing it. No, not an adjective. Hang on. Describing word, yeah. So I'm doing something. Whereas feeling safe is being. It's like it's the stillness. So you can do a million things a day of the things that you are meant to be doing, but if the voice inside your head is telling you, well, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working, like, it's not going to work. So to simplify all of this, and if any of the listeners are feeling like they have been doing and nothing's been changing for them, this is the most simple and the most effective, in my opinion, exercise that you can do to create the safety in your body. And it's so freaking simple. You can do it right now. So when we breathe, there are so many sensations that your mind just blocks out. So every single time you breathe through your nostril, you feel a sensation in your nose about the air, the feeling, but it might be cold, it might be a little bit warm. But if you just breathe in through your nose now, you can actually feel that sensation. You have that every single time you breathe, but you're not aware of it. So just focus on that for a second. Just continue your normal breathing pattern. And then on the next inhale, I want you to notice what impact that breath has on your entire body. So your chest might expand, your belly might expand, your shoulders might rise. You might feel it at the back of your throat, like in your airwaves. And then you exhale and you might feel that kind of warmness in your mouth. So that's happening every single time you breathe. And if you literally just close your eyes and visualize the air coming in, it's coming through your airwaves, it's coming into your chest, it's coming into your belly, then it's coming out of your mouth. And if you simply just say, I'm here, with your eyes closed, that is one of the most grounding, the most bringing you into the present moment than anything else that you'll ever do. You can go for as many walks, as many ice baths as you want, but if your mind isn't right here, right now, none of it matters. So yes, you can do, but your mind has to be in the stillness in order for it to be effective. And that exercise that I just kind of took you guys through, I have taken numerous people from like heightened state of panic down to calm in like less than 10 breaths. You just have to be present in your body and it has to feel safe. That's it. It's simple.
I love that. It's interesting. And I would have, maybe this is like my ignorance, or maybe this is because I've done this for years, that like you saying that it has to be in your being. Okay, this is falling off. Rotating all day, obviously. Yeah, maybe this is like my ignorance, or just because I've been doing it for years, but like I would always associate what I've described as in my being. I wouldn't really associate them with doing, because I associate it as time to connect with myself, to be with my thoughts, to be with my body, to be switched off from the world. And that's so interesting. I didn't even consider the other perspective that people think of it as doing. Like I obviously did to some extent, because I know like clients were like, oh, I don't want to do this, or I don't want to blah blah blah, and I'll find a way to explain it in a way that makes it more comfortable for them to be. But I never actually thought how people can view it as just another thing to have to do, or another thing to tick a box for, or whatever. That's so interesting.
It's literally that it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't actually matter. Like your mindfulness practice for the day could literally be like sitting on your bed for 5 minutes in the morning staring at the ceiling. Like you don't have to do anything. But whatever it is that you choose, your mind just has to be still and present. And if you think about like doing, it's actually just another way to avoid.
Yeah. No, I love that. Like that's what a lot of clients, I'll try to get them to start meditation, or some sort of breathing regulation, from the initial consultation, and the typical response is, I don't like it, it feels uncomfortable, I just don't think it works for me. And it's like, it has to feel like you're achieving something, there's an outcome from it, but it's like, no, it's just actually connecting with your breathing. It's actually just being in your body for a few minutes. It's actually just, you don't need to reach spiritual enlightenment from doing meditation. And although there's amazing hypnotherapy, trippy ass meditations, that can bring you to another fucking planet and another dimension, you don't need to do that. So yeah, that's incredible. Okay, I've got one question for you. On the spot surprise question. I nearly forgot I do this with everyone, but what is 1 to 3 pieces of advice that you would give to your younger self?
1 to 3 pieces of advice. Oh, there's a few that's coming to my mind, but I'm like, this is the advice that my younger self knew, and it's just kind of stuck with me. Maybe I'll go younger. Fuck. In high school, I wish someone has spoke to me about finances. I would be a millionaire now. Like I was hyper independent, so I used to work every hour under the sun. I would skip college and go to work. And I was so like, making money was so easy for me. So easy. And I would save up like thousands and thousands of pounds. I'd have like wads of cash. Where is it? Don't know. I would get like, I got inheritance money. It went, where did it go? Clothes. Do you know what I mean? Like, fair enough, I bought like flights and I traveled a lot in my 20s. Like, I traveled a lot. But if I'd have just invested even 10% of it, life would be different. You know what I mean? But no. Money in, money out, which whatever, lessons, but younger self, invest. The other thing, I mean, I have this like ongoing thought that I remember Mel Robbins said this like 7 or 8 years ago when I saw her at a conference, and she said, no one is coming to save you. That repeats in my head 10 times a day. No one is coming to save you. Like I learned that thankfully at a young age, but that was like the biggest piece of advice. Like go and to like do something. And the third thing is a little bit materialistic, but I was so like, I used to just lose things all the time. I didn't care about like, I had no like awareness of like holding on to items that are like important. Just fucking lose things. Like I lost my mum's engagement ring, like gold diamond engagement ring. And like that eats me up because I'm like, why were you so stupid? But like everything else, like I just feel like everything else is just lessons and you can move on from it. So they were probably 3 really bad pieces of advice. But I would say finances, get your shit together. Items, stop losing everything, get your shit together. No one is coming to save you.
Incredible. Take a bow. It's really funny, isn't it, about the no one's coming to save you. I would have like been into all that like motivational shit throughout the years as well, of like these one-liners, but like I think that made me more hyper independent. I've been like, no one's gonna get this, no one's gonna work hard enough, no one's gonna blah blah blah. I think that made me a little bit more toxic. Not anymore, but when I was younger, it definitely helped me like take responsibility.
Yeah.
But it definitely set me down a very dark path.
I think again, it depends like what lens you look at it from. But the lens that I always looked at it from was, don't sit and wait for an opportunity to come and land on your doorstep. So like, you know, sometimes people be like, oh, I'm just gonna wait to see if like this job opens up, or I'm gonna wait to see if like they invite me to do this thing. Like, if you want something, go and make it happen. If you have an issue, no one's going to come and say, oh, you have this issue, let me help you.
Yeah.
So not necessarily like no one's coming to save you and like you have to be independent, you have to do this by yourself. It's more so like, I've always just seen it as like, okay, you want something, go get it.
Love it. Love it.
What's yours?
What's mine? I'm the podcast host.
I'm going to ask
Back
you.
off, bitch. What's mine? Fucking hell.
Advice, please.
Oh, I think we've run out of time.
No.
Fuck, we're on the spot now.
Hard, isn't it?
Care more about what you think about yourself than about what others think of you.
Love.
And act accordingly.
Yeah.
You are very fucking different from the people that you're spending time with, but it doesn't make you a loser.
Yeah.
Or like, do you know when you feel like because you're different and you when you're younger you just want to fit in. So I always thought there was something wrong with me. I do remember the analogy. So Nikki has just told me that like throughout my life, so abandonment has been a thing that has popped up for me, and she had this analogy that like I am like a sheep in a field of cows trying to fit in with the cows, but like I am a sheep and I'm no, am I the cow or am I the sheep?
Well, it wasn't necessarily you were either, but it's like if a sheep goes into a field of cows, it's going to feel out of place. It doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the sheep, it just means that it's in the wrong field.
Yeah.
But or it could very easily like live and have a happy life in that field, but the sheep isn't going to go, well, what's wrong with me, I'm not like the cows. They're just different. There's roles and purpose for both.
Yeah.
But then the sheep is never going to be like the cow. And if it tried to be, like if you saw a sheep trying to moo, you'd be like, that sheep's not, it's not meant to moo because it's not meant to. So you're not necessarily the cow or the sheep, but it's just you're just trying to make yourself fit into a place that isn't actually you could fit in there, but you're not going to be like them. Yeah.
You don't dim to fit in is like a big thing that I kind of live by now. Yeah. And like that's maybe the third one is really about like this year I've started to get kind of serious about business and finances and kind of like really stepping into like the person I want to become and the change I want to create in the world and where I want to bring my business to. And it's always been stuff that I've been too scared to do. It's always been like, who am I to talk about trauma? Who am I to have courses? Who am I to go deeper with all these things? Who am I to do events? Like all this stuff was always like always because of what I've done has come from a place of like such a risk or such a like you have had this one career laid out for you because you did science in college. How can you just suddenly take that leap? How can you suddenly be self-employed when you've no one in your sphere that is self-employed? You have no evidence that being self-employed works. You know, all these scary things, all these scary decisions that you're going to make, and you have no self-confidence. You can't public speak. You can't do any of these things. So like all these things that I would have had to do to get to the version I am today and still becoming and still working through, they have all felt so risky, uncomfortable, scary. Yeah, all those things. And it's only this year that I finally feel that I'm stepping into this version of myself and being like, why the fuck not? Can't I do a photo shoot on the weekend with Nikki? Do you know? And like I take the podcast mic up now and I'm just chatting pure shit and I don't really give a fuck. I really don't give a fuck. And that is, I'm going for it. I'm trusting the vision. I'm really like, really coming back to this place of like, I get to be alive. I get to do what I want to do when I've got one fucking life to do it.
That actually just reminded me of a really good piece of advice that I would give to my younger self.
Your tree is gone.
I know, but can I just like elaborate on yours a little bit? Yeah. So, it's, don't you think that when you're younger and you start something, you're in such a rush to get to the finish line, and it's like, I'll be happy when I'll take a weekend off when I've got this, or I'll be social, I'll be like social, or I'll look at dating when I've got this or when I've got this. It's like you put everything, your heart and soul, into something because you want it to happen straight away. But what I've realized is that like now I'm in a really good place with my business, and yes, everything that I did up until this point has helped me get here, but it's actually so much less about getting to that goal and so much more about the person you have to become in that process. Yes. So like if you'd have taken me back, like when me and you were writing our business plans like however many years ago, and we was doing it on like PowerPoint or whatever it's called, and it was like my logo was like crap, and it just all of this, just it's cute, but it's also like the vision was huge, love it. But like if I'd have gone to sleep that night and woken up tomorrow with the business that I wanted, the business that I had today, I wouldn't have been the person that I needed to be to handle that. Yeah. So it's not about the goal, it's not about the outcome, it's about who you have to become in order to have that thing. And something that I really like to tell myself like daily is like when I'm challenging myself and asking myself questions like, who do I need to be today? So if I had this today, if I had like X amount of, you know, if my business was here, who do I need to be today? If I had like this in my relationship, who would I be today? And then aligning my behavior to be that. It's very powerful. Because you like, if I was a multimillionaire, what would I be doing? You know? Yeah. So it removes the fear.
The identity.
Like, yes. Realign your identity.
There you have it, folks. The identity is where it's at. That's very good. Mic drop. I'm not going to drop the mic. But thank you so much for listening. That was very enjoyable. Did you enjoy yourself?
I had a great time.
Can you tell people a little bit, or can you just tell people? Just tell the people. I always butcher the end. I don't know why.
You want me to tell people
where can they find you?
Where they can find you.
Actually, I have to ask that question. Can you tell people where they can find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Nikki officially, and you can also find me at Mind Health School, but Nikki officially is fine, just come there.
Good. But thank you all so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast episode, I would appreciate if you took your little booty over to Spotify or Apple and just tapped the little 5 stars, because it very much appreciates. And I very much appreciate all your support to date. We're now on season 5, and I can't cope with the amount of listeners have been tuning in, and it is hopefully going to get bigger and better, and I can't wait for what's coming next. But yeah, thank you so much, and I will chat to you on the next one. Bye. Fab. Now just do a little just do a pause for like the YouTube thing. Go. Done.